Well, good evening and welcome back to Wednesday Night Live, coming to you from Pocatello, Idaho, in the beautiful Portneuf Valley, gateway to the great Northwest. And we're glad you're here tonight. I have to apologize. We had a couple of rerun programs for you in the last couple of weeks. A lot has been going on, and I couldn't get into the studio to record a couple, so I hope you weren't too put off by the reruns. Perhaps you got some new information if you watched it for a second time or for the first time. But before we go any further, as I do every week at this time, let me remind you about Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center. These folks are indeed doing God's work. They are the antithesis, everything opposed to Planned Parenthood. These folks, their only plans for parenthood is that you should be allowed to have your baby and that you and the baby should be well. So if you have the opportunity, now as those of you who watch from outside the state, as I've told you every week, the area code for the entire state is 208. So I would ask you, please call 208-478-HOPE, 478-HOPE, and see what you can do to save the life of a baby. Maybe help a young mother. Perhaps she wasn't expecting a baby and needs your help. They can use your financial aid. There are other ways that you can help them, but please call them 208-478-HOPE. Now, if I sound like I'm rushing, I don't want to, but there's so much that I want to talk to you about before we get to our recording tonight, and I think it's one that, well, I hope you'll watch it. I saw it for the first time today. I had been told about it. I was intrigued, and I hope you're going to find it interesting. But before we do that, let's kind of clear the air a little bit on what's happening locally. And if you're reading the Idaho State Journal, those of you who still do, remember I have to, because that's the only way I can keep up with what the baloney that's being passed across to you. Well, yesterday, Tuesday, January 24th, Republican controversy, Republican controversy continues. And this is all about the convention. And tonight we're going to tell you what really happened at the convention, not what people who weren't even there are telling you, not like the so-called conservative blogs that is a little bit less than conservative, not like the newspaper who did not have a representative, well, not a press representative. Apparently there's a rat in the woodpile because they're finding things here that may or may not have happened. So let me just tell you what happened and tell you what's happening within the Republican Party. Now, those of you who are Democrats, this may be humorous for you. It's not humorous for the Republicans, but it does have its moments of humor. For the first time that I can remember, and I've been a Republican for over 40 years, this is the first time I've ever seen anything this deep on a local basis. I've seen it, we've all seen it on a national basis. There's been this fight going on between the conservatives, the so-called moderates, which, in my opinion, a moderate is a coward who won't declare that he's a liberal. And basically that's it. They'll sit on the fence and hope that they can drift with the wind and catch whatever's popular at the moment. But a moderate, what is a moderate? I don't know. Anyway, so you've got this rift in the Republican Party. It's across the nation, but you're seeing it, of course, amplified here locally. Well, we had the Republican Party had its state convention, and there were a couple of things that happened. One of them was that the local Republican establishment, when they had the reorganization party several weeks ago, gained complete control of the party. There are, with two exceptions, there are no conservatives in the Republican Party locally. There are so-called moderates, and there are some pretty extreme left-leaner moderates, however you want to do it. But the conservatives are in the actual meetings. When we have our Bannock County Republican Party meetings, the conservatives are outnumbered on votes about 2-1, roughly. Now, what happened was, at the reorganization meeting, the establishment Republicans, who are so intent on driving out the conservatives, who the newspaper, the ISJ, loves to call them the Tea Partiers. Well, there are people that are Tea Partiers in the conservative part of the Republican Party, but not everybody is a Ron Paul or Tea Party or however you want to do it. They're simply conservatives, constitutionally oriented conservatives. Well, the establishment Republicans are so intent on driving the conservatives out of the party that they didn't let the rules get in their way. They got the rules became a little less than important at the reorganization meeting. And what basically happened, and if you've been reading the so-called conservative blogs or the newspaper, it's a little different from what actually happened. Was once the steamroller had gone into effect and they had eliminated all the conservatives, then a motion was made by the floor by someone, I believe he was out of order, but the chair recognized him. And the chair, I think, kind of got ambushed because we have a brand new chairman. He has been a chairman, I guess, back in the late 80s. Politics have changed here somewhat since the late 80s. So he's going to have to relearn about local politics. But I think he kind of got blindsided or steamrolled. The motion was made, rather than go through all of the boring details of having people speak on certain issues about candidates and for delegates and all that, motion was made, well, let's just take all the people that were just elected into office, the executive people, and we'll make them the delegates de facto. We don't even have to talk about it. We've already elected them. Let's just make them the delegates. And oh, by the way, why don't we make their wives and or significant others the alternates? Boy, does that solve a lot of problems. Then that way the precinct people don't even have to speak. Of course, the little fact is that they do have a responsibility to speak for their precincts, but well, one of the things that was said was, rather than take a whole lot of time to make these decisions, let's just do this. You know, folks, I just have this strange notion that when you have a reorganization, you should take all the time it takes, all the time it needs to make your decision as to who's going to represent your party, including delegates to the state convention. Well, what it amounts to is the establishment, moderate, left-wing, what do you want to call them? They steamrolled this thing, and they said, we'll just have all of the elected officials and their wives or significant others will be the delegates and the alternates. Well, several precinct committeemen rose and said, wait a minute, I represent X precinct, I speak for them, and I don't think we should just blanket them in. I may want to make a nomination for this. No, that'll take too much time. Come on. Well, it is a reorganization. That's pretty significant. It'll take too much time. So there were 3, 4, maybe half a dozen precinct committeemen who didn't think this was kosher. They thought that they should be allowed to speak. They were pushed out of the picture. And the 44 were loosely designated as the delegates and alternates. After this part of the meeting, because it had to break up and go to a different part of the meeting, a couple of people approached the chair and said, wait a minute, you're probably not going to have all of those people show up. Can we be like standby alternates? Because we'd like to be there. My wife is an officer in the Republican Party. She had to be there for something else, not to vote or anything. And so we had decided we would like to go. Quite honestly, I really didn't want to go. Watching what happened in the reorganization was enough to turn my stomach, and I'd probably had about all I needed of the Republican Party or any other politics for that night. At any rate, she approached the chairman, a couple of people approached the chairman and said, if they don't show up, can we be alternates? They were told, and not necessarily by the party chairman. This is very interesting. One of the other officials, one who had made the motion from the floor, I guess, I don't know if he got direction from the chairman or whatever, but he took it upon himself to help those who wanted to go. My wife was told to contact him and put our names on the list, which she did. Turns out there were 8 of us that actually decided we wanted to go. When we got there, lo and behold, there weren't 22 elected people and there weren't 22 alternates. Matter of fact, there were only 9 of the elected people that showed up, and they weren't all there. The day that the committees made all the decisions, those 9 weren't all there. So, however, the 8 of us that had gone up there, we went to watch what was going to happen when they decided who was going to get to actually be delegates. During the course of the discussion with the various, now remember, these are delegates from all 44 counties. These are not just southeast Idaho. 44 counties are represented there. And so I don't remember how it was introduced, but a spokesman for the 8 of us went to the chairman of the delegate seating committee, whatever their title is, and said, look, you don't have all the people from Bannock County, and there are 8 people here who would like to be included. Could we be included as alternates? Somehow in this discussion, a floor motion was made, not from Bannock County, from another county, who happens to understand the rules a little better than our own leadership does, and they said, wait a minute. If those people, if they did this blanket thing, because we explained to the chairman how it came about that all these people were elected and selected or however, and then didn't show up, and why we were there. They said, wait a minute, that's a unit vote, that's a slate, you're not allowed to do that. We vote to get rid of the 9 that were sent up here as delegates. Now that was not the choice of the 8 of us who had turned up there. And our representative told the chairman, we're not looking to displace anybody, but you don't have enough people from our county, and you've got 8 people here who were told to come up anyway and have paid their way, have paid for the rooms and all that, spent the money on gas and time. We'd just like to be included. There's plenty of room. There are only 9 people that said they're going to be here. Well, the delegation, not ours, the delegates there, they said those 9 people, or the people who were selected, the Bannock County Republican Party leadership broke the rules. And as a consequence, we're not going to seat Bannock County Republican Party. Now that was not our doing. That was not what we were asking to do. Our spokesman told them, well, we don't really want to unseat anybody. We would just like to be included. At that point, someone else from the floor, again, not from our county, someone else from the floor said, well, we've already got rid of those 9, but you do have 8 people who showed up and want to be here. We should elect those 8 people to be delegates. Someone else spoke up and they said, no, you can't elect people from the local counties, which is correct, you can't. So they decided based on that they would not seat any of us, including those 8 of us who, for lack of a better term, were volunteers. That's how this got decided. Now that is before it actually went to the floor, where the delegates and the delegations and all that actually went forth. Now we come forward to the day when they're actually going to seat delegates. And and I'm going to shortcut this a lot just for brevity's sake. Raul Labrador, the congressman from District 1, is a very capable guy. Boy, he got thrown a couple sucker punches here, but he handled them very well. And you should be proud that we have at least one congressman from this state that is pretty much in sync with you, the people. At any rate, a lot of floor discussion went on. The Bannock County establishment people did their worst or their best, however you want to look at it, to bogart their way in spite of having broken the rules. And what it all boiled down to is they were not allowed to. And Bannock County, because the establishment Republicans, who were so intent on getting rid of the conservatives, the establishment Republicans broke the rules, and they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar. And interestingly enough, one of the things they tried to put forth at the convention was this old canard, but we've always done it like that. Well, maybe, maybe not. The point is, it was not legal. And this time they got caught. And this time, somebody held them to answer. And so Bannock County was not seated. Their delegations was not seated. Power County was not seated, but it was kind of an unnecessary thing because Power County didn't go. They had so much infighting in Power County, and their leadership also broke some rules, and they were called on it. Lance Earl, who was in Power County, called them on it, and they were so intent on getting rid of the conservatives in Power County, they just decided not to go at all. So they were excluded kind of de facto because they didn't show up, so they were not shown on the floor. Ada County, with 102 representatives, really had a catfight, or maybe more appropriately a dogfight, pit bull against pit bull. Ultimately, they were not seated. That was kind of a weird one, and I won't bore you with that. And Twin Falls was about to not be seated, but I don't think that got to that point because they were having a lot of controversy and they were having infighting for the very same reasons that we were not seated. And that is that so-called leadership among the establishment Republicans, so intent on getting rid of conservatives or Tea Partiers or whatever they want to call us, that they broke the rules. And somebody finally held them to answer. The rest of the convention, 2/3, 3/5, whatever it was, voted to support those delegations not being seated. So this was not like, nobody steamrolled anybody. This was all parliamentary procedure, Robert's rules, however you want to call it. But the long and the short of it was, the local establishment Republicans got caught with their hand in the cookie jar. Somebody slapped their hands and now they're pouting. They're not happy. Now let's move fast forward. According to the newspaper and other things that I've learned since then, apparently the establishment Republicans are planning to kick us out. At least 5 of us from that delegation of 8, and who knows who else. And my question would be, for what? By what authority? I'm a registered Republican. I've broken no rules. I've broken no laws. I'm not a precinct committeeman. I'm holding no office. But as a Republican, I have every right to be at a Republican, Bannock County Republican meeting. Unless I do, raise a ruckus or or do something unlawful, they have no legal authority by which they can ban me. So it would be very interesting if I show up and the establishment decides to throw me out or anybody else. Now I say me because I don't know if I'm included in that 8 or not, or I'm told that they're getting ready to show 5 people to the door. And I think it's kind of cute in a macabre sort of way, the way the Idaho State Journal does things. This article, for instance, that was actually written yesterday by journal staff and wire reports. In other words, leave no evidence. We don't want you to know who really wrote this thing. Says there's also talk that some Bannock County Republicans would like to ban a handful of their fellow members because they believe they played a role in the unseating of local delegates during the state convention. Although posts on the East Idaho Conservatives Facebook page, now the author of the East Idaho State, Conservative Facebook page, and I don't Facebook, but let me just tell you that, he wasn't there. All he's getting is what the establishment is telling him. He does not know because he was not there. Nor were a lot of the contributors, and I have read a lot of the posts in there, most of them were not there. But they're going to stand by the establishment and they'll say whatever they need to say to make the conservatives go away, which is what they want them to do. And why is that? What is it that the establishment Republicans find so repugnant about the conservative Republicans that they don't want them in the party? Well, I can tell you one thing is that the conservative Republicans believe that the platform is a pretty good thing. And we believe, most of us believe, all of it is a good thing. Are there a couple of things that maybe don't need to be there? Maybe, maybe not. But that platform was voted on by all Republicans in the state and was passed by a huge majority. And so those of us who are conservative Republicans really believe in the way the thing is supposed to work. We say, if you're going to call yourself a Republican, if you're going to represent the Republican Party, then you should act like a Republican. You should say, yeah, I like the platform. You should support it. The establishment, not so much so. There's some things they don't like, and what they would like to do is try to take over the party and change all that. Well, they have a right to do that, but they don't have a right to break the rules. That's where the problem is. All right, let's look at today's forum. And I love the forum, if for no other reason. Now, I'm looking at this today's forum, if you read that. That's in the editorial section. And it puts me in mind of a burglar wearing rubber gloves so there won't be any prints. The forum gets to be anonymous, so they can say just about whatever they want to, and you really never know who said it for sure. But in my opinion, and it's only opinion, but in my opinion, this has Mike O'Donnell's fingerprints all over it because it's the cutesy way he likes to write. Maybe not, I may be casting, putting forth facts not in evidence, but it looks like the way he writes, because Mike O'Donnell does not like Republicans, not just the party. He does not like Republicans. He is a very left, I suppose he's a Democrat, I really don't know, but he does not like Republicans of any ilk, but he'll take whatever he can get. And if the moderates, so-called, will give him fodder, boy, he'll be happy to use it. So what do they say in today's local GOP mulls ban on agitators? So now if you're a conservative and you're trying to get people to obey the laws or the rules and support the platform, that makes you an agitator. Interesting choice of words. One of the things that was, let's see, those set to be vanquished are a group of disenfranchised local Republicans who traveled to the GOP convention in Moscow earlier this month and persuaded state party leaders to unseat Bannock County's Republican delegates. Not true. Idaho State Journal, I call you out on that. That is not what happened. You weren't there, nor were the people who gave you this garbage. They weren't there. What happened was the Republican delegate group from the entire state decided that the party locally had broken the rules. And we, in spite of that, we 8 that were these disenfranchised delegates, we asked them not to disenfranchise those 9. We asked, no, we would like to see all of us, all 17 of us, in there together, not just get rid of 9. So that's lie number 1. Untruth, mistake of number 1. All right, then I love this. We won't name the Bannock County Republicans targeted for removal, but those in the know could easily guess their names. This sounds like a 1940s gossip column. Did you see what's her name on the arm? What's his name? What were they doing? What's their game? Come on, Idaho State Journal. Sometimes, all right. Moderate Bannock County Republicans who seem to have a very very firm control of the county GOP at present, have plenty of reason to want to show these alleged troublemakers the door. Yeah? What reasons are those? Forum writers, anonymous writers. What reasons? What kind of trouble? Is the trouble that we're asking them to play by the rules? Okay. Let's see, let's go on here to talk about the fate of the majority of Republicans across Idaho likely look at the far-right Tea Partiers in their ranks and think how wonderful it would be if these ultra-conservatives formed their own party and showed themselves the door. Really? Upon what information do you get that? Since it was the majority of Republicans from across the state who threw these delegates out. It wasn't us. It was the majority of the delegates. 3/5 or 2/3 or whatever it amounted to. In other words, the other 40 delegations, groups, voted to throw them out, not us. Keep your facts straight, ISJ, if that's possible. I know you have a little trouble with that. But, you know, one of the things that we've been told time and again is don't air the Republican Party's dirty laundry. Are you kidding? There's a rat in the woodpile who has apparently run right over to the ISJ and say, hey, look, here's what's happening. Don't mention my name, but here's what's happening. Humbug. All right. Okay, in past years there was a feeling among the majority moderate Republicans that they coexist with their far-right colleagues. Well, the so-called moderate Republicans have not coexisted with anybody. They have tried over and again to control the party, and they haven't managed to succeed. Locally they have. If all you have is this little bubble called Bannock County, it looks like they're really in control. They are here. They've managed to run out everybody except their pals. But statewide, no, the conservatives, the people who really believe the Constitution means something, they are the ones running the party, not Bannock County. Let's see. Well, and then it says that we wonder what the GOP will look like when it's all said and done. Well, I can tell you what it looked like. It looked like it did 7 or 8 years ago when it was dead in the water. Nothing was happening because there was this small group who still are doing their best to, or their worst to, keep control of the party. They had control. The Republican Party in Bannock County couldn't even get a quorum. So these little 5 or 6 or 7 people would tell those of us who were dumb enough to show up, this is who we're going to vote for. Now go out and elect Republicans. Go out and support these Republicans. And until a voice of reason came in about 6 years ago and started showing us how this is supposed to work, and we started thinking, wait a minute, precinct committeemen? You mean they're actually supposed to go out and talk to their constituents? There's supposed to be something going on here? All right, so now you know the story on what really happened at the convention. The ISJ, take a hike. If you're not going to go do it yourself, don't use somebody else's baloney to substantiate your hate for the Republican Party. All right, we're going to move forward. I'd like to spend more time on that, but I've got this film I want to show you, and I think you're going to find it useful. Little piece of information. This Friday, there will be the recount, the ballot recount for Proposition 1. Vote yes, Pocatello, whatever, however you want to say it. The ballot count, I'm told, will start at 9 o'clock. Those of us involved are supposed to be in the county offices at 8:30. It will start at 9 o'clock. I'm just guessing it takes, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours to run all this through here. The controversy has been, and you're going to see this in a film clip here in a moment. You know what, Josh, can we just show that number 1 film clip? Are we, hello? Yeah, okay. Let's show that first one.
Making waves for some statements he made on a public access show. While some are saying his remarks are hurtful, others say it's part of his First Amendment rights. KPVI News 6 reporter Logan McDougall has more.
Well, thanks, Matt. It's because of the U.S. Constitution, the First Amendment, and a pillar of free speech in the community that this show's able to go to air.
See, if the homosexuals can't get you to accept their lifestyle and that you won't give them your approbation, well, then they will make you do it. And they will make you do it under penalty of law, such as the non-discrimination ordinance, which we are still trying to fight, and we'll talk about that in a moment.
Those are the statements of Ralph Lillig on his weekly TV show Wednesday Night Live. Lillig's the chairman of Vote Yes Pocatello, the group that fought to get Pocatello's non-discrimination ordinance off the books, and is now funding a recount on the May 20th vote where the citizens said it should stay.
Think about this is Nazi Germany, folks. This is not equal rights. This is not civil rights. This is Nazi Germany.
The show itself is broadcast from City Hall at Channel 12. Kathy Oborn, Video Services Director for Channel 12, says the station serves as an electronic soapbox for the community, and there are only a few guidelines that shows need to follow. Things like they not be obscene, they're not commercial, and not violate any local, state, or federal law, to name a few.
When you talk about freedom of speech, you're not always going to agree with what someone's saying. Let's take the Ku Klux Klan for a perfect example. You might not appreciate their message, and you might find it hateful and distasteful, but yet if you really believe in the freedom of speech, you have to protect that kind of speech, because it's also the freedom of speech that protects you to be able to say what you want to say.
So where does Channel 12 get their funding? Oborn says if you pay for cable, it's in those cable franchise fees you pay, and they also get it from a little bit of tax dollars. Reporting in Pocatello, Logan McDougall, KPVI News 6.
Now, Oborn also says that Channel 12 has not received any formal complaints about the program.
I find it interesting, and Kathy, I wish you'd used a different analogy. Maybe that was the first one that popped into your mind. But there is this pesky little thing called the United States Constitution that protects you and me. It's called freedom of speech, and or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. And that's what allows, for those of you questioning, how can you do that? It's called freedom of speech. And you heard the guidelines. I would challenge you. Those of you who are promoting the homosexual agenda, those of you who are in the LGBTQ community and are having a field day pillaring me because of my comments and my opinions, I suggest that you have your own programs. You have your own guests, and you speak about your lifestyle, and by whatever through powers of persuasion or whatever, you should come forth. Instead of hiding and just taking shots and throwing darts at me, have the guts to put yourself out front and say, yes, I am a homosexual, yes, I belong to the LGBTQ community, and this is why I think it's good for all of us. See if you have the guts to do that. It's not a whole lot of fun to sit here every week and try to bring information to people that I think might be useful. But it's probably a lot more fun for you to sit in the dark and throw darts than it is to come out and speak publicly. And I don't mean at the city council meetings and in the newspaper where you can be, benign little side column. Have the guts to go on camera and talk about it. Josh, let's quickly run that other one if we could. Okay, we got to wind up the other one. The other one is important because it talks to the same issue, but it also talks about the recount that's going to be happening on Friday. And by the way, I would invite you to be in the county just like you were on an election night, be in the county offices, in the building, wherever they're going to let us seat. And you should watch this and watch how this is conducted. All right, are we good on that, Josh? All right, we're having, as they say in real television, we're having some technical problems. And we probably aren't going to get to show this because we have another piece that I want to show. Josh, we're running out of time. Can we just go ahead and do the long one? We're not going to get to this one. It's unfortunate because I was hoping that I'd get an opportunity to show you what we have been up against in trying to do this recount. It has been very interesting, and I guess I'll have to talk about it next Wednesday, and it'll be after the recount. But Josh, are we good to go on the longer piece? All right, this is the one that's going to take almost this whole half hour. So please,
well, will you please
pay attention to this one. Thank you.
A warm welcome to Dr. Rosaria Butterfield.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Am I? Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. I had a normal childhood, whatever that means. My parents raised me in the Catholic faith, and I attended predominantly Catholic schools. My liberal Catholic all-girl high school discipled me in the life skills that I use today. I learned there to read deeply and well, to diagram a sentence before I tried to interpret it, and to look out for the unloved and draw him in. I had, by all outward appearances, a heterosexual adolescence. In college, I met my first boyfriend. It was a heady experience. My heart and my body felt pitted in some majestic battle. On the one hand, I liked having a boyfriend. Having boyfriends kept nagging feelings at bay. An undercurrent of longing undergirded my intense friendships with women, and that commanded greater angst than any current boyfriend. The repetitious sensibility rooted and grew. I simply preferred the company of women. Enhanced by feminist philosophy, my homosocial preference morphed into homoerotic attraction. I studied Freud. I cheered that the DSM removed homosexuality from its list of disorders, thus rendering homosexuality normal. And with no prohibitions or constraints, by the time I had graduated from The Ohio State University with my PhD, I left the Buckeye State with a monogamous lesbian partner. We moved to New York for me to begin a tenure-track position in the English department at Syracuse University. My life as a lesbian just seemed normal. I considered it an enlightened, chosen path. Lesbianism felt like a cleaner and more moral choice. Always preferring symmetry, I believed I had found my real self. What happened to my Catholic training? Well, I believe now that it was hogwash, hocus pocus, and hooey. The name Jesus, which had rolled off my tongue in a little girl's prayer, then rolled off my back in college, now made me recoil with pity and with anger. As a professor of English and women's studies on the track to becoming a tenured radical, I cared about morality, justice, and compassion. Fervent for the worldviews of Freud, Hegel, Marx, and Darwin, I strove to stand with the disempowered. I valued morality. And I probably could have stomached Jesus and his little band of warriors if it were not for how other cultural forces buttressed the fierce triangle of God, patriarchy, and politics. Pat Robertson's quip from the 1992 Republican National Convention pushed me over the edge. He said, "Feminism encourages women to leave their husbands, kill their children, practice witchcraft, destroy capitalism, and become lesbians." My life at this time was happy, meaningful, and full. I was not seeking the Lord. My partner and I shared many vital interests: AIDS activism, children's health and literacy, golden retriever rescue, our Unitarian Church, just to name a few. And even if you believe the ghost stories about gay and lesbian folks promulgated by Robertson and his ilk, it was hard to argue that my partner and I were anything but good citizens and caregivers. The GLBTQ community values hospitality and applies it with skill, sacrifice, and integrity. I honed the hospitality gifts that I use today as a pastor's wife in my queer community. I began researching the religious right and their politics of hatred against people like me. To do this, I began reading the Bible while looking for some Bible scholar to help me wade through this complex book. I took note that the Bible was an engaging literary display of every genre and trope and type. It had edgy poetry, deep and complex philosophy, and compelling narrative stories. It also embodied a worldview that I hated: sin, repentance, Sodom and Gomorrah, absurd. At this time, the Promise Keepers came to town and parked their circus at the university. On my war against stupid, I wrote an article published in the local newspaper. It was 1997. The article generated many rejoinders, so many that I kept a Xerox box on each side of my desk, one for hate mail and one for fan mail. One letter I received defied my filing system. It was from the pastor of the Syracuse Reformed Presbyterian Church. It was a kind and inquiring letter. It encouraged me to explore the kind of questions that I admire. Ken did not argue with my article. Rather, he asked me to defend the presuppositions that undergirded it. In his letter, he described Jesus as someone who entered into history, not someone who emerged from it. I thought this was insane. I was a historical materialist, and I believed that people proceed from history and are shaped, for good or for ill, by the culture that molds them. I didn't know how to respond to his letter, so I threw it away. And later that night, I fished it out of the department's recycling bin and put it back on my desk, where it stared at me for a week, confronting me with the worldview divide that demanded a response. As a postmodern intellectual, I operated from a historical materialist worldview, but Christianity is a supernatural worldview. Ken's letter punctured the integrity of my research project without him even knowing it. If I was going to understand how this book, the Bible, got so many people off track, and how this man Jesus persuaded so many people to follow him, then I needed to understand Christianity as a supernatural idea. At this point in my life, the category of the supernatural was reserved for Stephen King novels. With the letter, and Stephen King was a big donor to our English department also, so we all had to tuck in a Stephen King novel in a class. It was kind of fun. With the letter, Ken initiated 2 years of bringing the church to me, a heathen. Oh, I had seen my share of Bible verses and wacky interpretations on placards at gay pride marches. That Christians who mocked me at Gay Pride Day were happy that I and everyone I loved was going to hell was as clear as the sky is blue. But Ken's letter did not mock, it engaged. So when his letter invited me to dinner at his house to discuss these matters more fully, I accepted. My motives at the time were clear. Surely this would be good for my research. But something else happened. Ken and his wife Floy and I became friends. They entered my world. They met my friends. We did book exchanges. We talked openly about sexuality and politics. They did not act as if such conversations were polluting them. They did not treat me like a blank slate. When we ate together, Ken prayed in a way that I had never heard before. His prayers were intimate, vulnerable. He repented of his sin in front of me. He thanked God for all things. Ken's God was holy and firm, yet full of mercy. Ken and Floy omitted 2 important steps in the rule book of how Christians should deal with a heathen like me. They did not share the gospel with me at that first dinner, and they did not invite me to church. Because of these omissions to the Christian rule book, I knew that when Ken extended his hand to me in friendship, it was safe to close my hand in his. I started meeting with Ken and Floy regularly, reading the Bible in earnest, with pen in hand, a notebook in lap. It was, after all, good for my research. I read The Way a Glutton Devours. I read it many times that first year in multiple translations. The text started to take on a life and a meaning that startled me. Some of my well-worn paradigms no longer stuck. I had to at least ponder the hermeneutical claim that this book was different from all others because it was, supposedly, inspired by a holy God and inherently true and trustworthy. This led me to go through the presuppositional truth claims, just to check the math of the meaning here. And the logic, as I understood it, goes like this. Claim number 1. If this was a book written by men who were inspired by the Holy Spirit, then its admonitions about sin were not applied cultural phobia. Why? Because God's goodness, unrestrained by time or history, anticipates and guards against the ill treatment of people. Claim 2, if God is the creator of all things, and if the Bible has his seal of truth and power, then the Bible has the right to interrogate my life and my culture, not the other way around. Even as a postmodern reader, I understood the idea that authority can only depend on that which is higher than itself. Who is higher than God? I wondered. At a dinner gathering that my partner and I were hosting, my transgendered friend Jay cornered me in the kitchen. She put her large hand over mine and said, "Rosaria, this Bible reading is changing you." I felt exposed. I felt like I was going to throw up. I collapsed in the chair and I exhaled, "But Jay, what if it's true? What if Jesus is a real and risen Lord? What if we are all in trouble?" Jay exhaled deeply and sat down in the chair across from me. Her eyes looked wise, but her makeup made her look distorted to me for the first time. "Rosaria," she said, "I was a Presbyterian minister for 15 years. I prayed that God would heal me, but he didn't. If you want, I'll pray for you." The next day, when I returned home from work, I found 2 large milk crates spilling over with theological books, Jay's books. She was giving them to me. In Calvin's Institutes, in the margins of the exposition of the book of Romans, in Jay's handwriting was a warning: "Watch Romans 1. This is where I will fall." Romans 1, 21 to 26, suddenly looked like the table of contents of my life. This is what it says: "For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man, and of birds, and of 4-footed animals, and crawling creatures. Therefore, God gave them over in the lust of their hearts to impurity, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them. For they exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator. And for this reason, God gave them over to degrading passions, for their women exchanged the natural function for that which is natural." I took a good look at the verb clauses here. Did not honor God, did not give thanks, engaged in futile speculations, became fools, exchanged the incorruptible for the corruptible. God then gives us over to our lusts. When we look at the world through our lusts, we dishonor our bodies, and we worship the world. This verse seemed to provide a haunting literary echo to Genesis 3, where Eve's desire to live independently of God's authority made perfect sense to me. If I were Eve, I would have done the same thing. And at the same time, Eve's seemingly innocent sin, eating fruit after all, served as the leverage for the whole world to come tumbling down, fierce and fast, bloody and brilliant. The 2 verses, one in Genesis and one in Romans, stood out as bookends of my life. Not just my life, that's the rub. Genesis 3 and Romans 1 stood out as the table of contents of what ails the world. Indeed, Romans 1 does not end by highlighting homosexuality as the worst and most extreme example of the sin of failing to give God the glory for creating us. Here is where the passage finds its crescendo: being filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. And although they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also give hearty approval to those who practice them. Homosexuality, then, is not the end point of the problem for God or for the world, but it is presented here as one step in the journey. Homosexuality, then, seemed maybe consequential, not causal. Perhaps homosexuality was not the root of all sin. Perhaps not even the root of all of my sin. This stopped me in my tracks. I tried to toss the Bible and its teachings in the trash. I really tried. But Ken encouraged me to keep reading and to keep testing the waters. After all, it was just a book, right? What did I have to lose? I kept reading it, I kept devouring it, and I kept trying to understand it. And I kept catching my wings in its daily embrace. I was fighting the idea that the Bible is inspired and inerrant, that is, that its meaning and purpose has a holy and supernatural authority that has protected it over the years of its canonicity, and that it is the repository of truth. How could a smart cookie like me believe things like this? I didn't even believe in truth. I was a postmodernist. I believed in truth claims. I believed that the reader constructed the text, that a text's meaning found its power only in the reader's interpretation of it. Without the reader, a book is just paper and glue, I told my students, over and over again. How could this one book lay claim to a birthright and progeny so different from all the others? Don't get me wrong. Research is personal and agonizing. I have sweated and cried over almost every word of most of my writing, and I still do. Often, writing literally makes me sick. But that this book was supernatural was becoming more and more evident to me, and my hermeneutical bag of tricks had no system of containment for it. As I was reading and discussing these things with Ken, he pointed out to me that Jesus is the Word made flesh, and that knowing Jesus demands embracing Jesus of the Bible, not Jesus of someone's imagination. The whole Bible, even the places that took my life captive. After years of this, something happened. The Bible got to be bigger inside me than I. It overflowed into my world, and I fought against it with all my might. And then, one Sunday morning, 2 years after I first met Ken and Floy, and 2 years after I started reading the Bible for my research, I rose from the bed of my lesbian lover, and an hour later, I sat in a pew at the Syracuse Reformed Presbyterian Church. I don't say that to be lurid. I say that to remind all of us that we have no idea the journey that people walk to get to church. We have no idea. Conspicuous of my butch haircut and my jeans, I reminded myself that I came there to meet God, not to fit in. Ken was preaching through the Gospel of Matthew, with its bewildering cast of characters and problems, separated unto the gospel, seeds choked by the world, feeding thousands with some nameless kid's bread and fish. Then Jesus' cutting question to impetuous Peter, quote, "Do you still lack understanding?" Followed by Pastor Ken's steel blue eyes and a long pause before he turned this question on us. "Congregation, did Christ ever say this to you?" he asked. This startled me. This was my question. This question was for me. Do I still lack understanding? Who is speaking here, the man behind the pulpit or the God-man behind the foundation and the redemption of his people? Yes, no. What am I thinking? The image that crashed like waves in a raging sea of me and everyone I loved suffering in hell just vomited into my consciousness and gripped me in its teeth. Not primarily because we were gay, but because we were proud, we were autonomous. It was our hearts first, our bodies next. I got it. I heard it, finally. And I fought with everything I had. I did not want this. I did not ask for this. I counted the costs, and I did not like the math. This was my crucible. And this is my crucible. If the Bible is true, then I was dead. And if the Bible is false, then I'm the biggest fool on earth. But God's promises rolled in like another round of waves into my world. And one Lord's Day, Ken was preaching on John 7:17. Quote, "If anyone wills to do God's will, he shall know concerning the doctrine," unquote. This verse exposed the quicksand in which my feet were stuck. I was a thinker. People actually paid me to think, to read books, and to write about them. I expected that in all areas of my life, understanding came before obedience, not the other way around. I wanted God to show me on my terms why homosexuality was a sin. I wanted to be the judge, not the one being judged. Perhaps I thought, like Eve in the garden, I wanted to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil so that I could become and replace God. And I wondered, hadn't I already tried to do this? Hadn't we all? Perhaps not here, not perhaps in my life on earth, but certainly in Adam. If my consciousness fell in Adam's sin, as the Bible purports, no wonder I couldn't think my way out of this quandary. This wasn't a game of thinking and of matching of wits. Could my heart echo God's call for obedience? Could I will to do God's will just this once? The stakes were so very high, they always are. But the verse promised understanding after obedience, and I wrestled with the question, did I really want to understand homosexuality from God's point of view? Or did I just want to argue with him? I prayed that night that God would give me the willingness to obey before I understood. I prayed long into the unfolding day, and when I looked in the mirror, I looked the same. But when I looked in the mirror of the Bible, I wondered, am I a lesbian, or has this all been a case of mistaken identity? If Jesus could split the world asunder, divide the soul and the spirit, judge the thoughts and the intentions of the heart, could he make my true identity prevail? Who am I? Who will God have me to be? I still felt like a lesbian in my body and in my heart. That was, I felt my quote-unquote real identity. But what is my true identity? The Bible makes clear that the real and the true have a troubled relationship, at least on this side of eternity. For many people in the Bible, their true identity and calling comes only after a long struggle with God, with wilderness, with dreams and hopes and plans. The Bible makes clear that my future and my calling always echo an attribute of God. Obedience constrains. It always mirrors suffering, as every selection implies a sacrifice. Who is this Jesus? Did I know him? Did I still lack understanding? Could I trust him? And then one ordinary day, I came to Jesus. No altar calls in a Reformed Presbyterian church, so no fanfare, no manipulation. We were singing from Psalm 119, line 56. This has become mine, because forever all thy precepts I preserve. After I sang those words, I stopped. Something shifted. 2 weight-bearing walls collapsed. The first wall came crashing down because I had just sung condemnation unto myself. This Bible was not mine. I had scorned it, I had cursed it, I had despised it. And I had been reading and rereading the book. And the use of the helping verb here, has, in has become, really troubled me. 2 years of laborious reading embodies the helping verb has. It showed process, journey, pilgrimage, and danger. But I was not, quote unquote, in Christ, and therefore could not possibly keep these precepts, not in word, not in heart change, not in deed. And here was the shattering of the second wall. I had read the Bible many times through. If I finally could become honest with myself, I would have to say that I saw for myself that it had a holy author. I saw for myself that it was a canonized collection of 66 books with a unified biblical revelation. I heard for myself that when the words, "This has become mine," came out of my mouth in congregational singing, I was attesting to this one simple truth, that the line of communication that God ordained for his people required this wrestling with Scripture, and that I truly wanted to both hear God's voice breathed into my life, and I wanted God to hear my pleas. The fog burned away. The whole Bible, each jot and tittle, was my open highway to a holy God. My hands let go of the wheel of self-invention. I came to Jesus alone, open-handed and naked. It was a crushing revelation. It was Jesus I had been persecuting the whole time. Here was the other crushing revelation. My conversion hurt many people. I could write a whole book with the title, quote, "What My Obedience to God Costs Other People," unquote. I can do the body count of those I love who were pressed and mangled by the consequences of Christ's call on my life. In this war of worldviews, Ken and Floy were there. The church, who had been praying for me for years, was there. Jesus triumphed, and I was a broken mess. I lost everything but the dog. I speak today about matters that happened over a decade ago. I'm now a wife and a mother, but I don't necessarily believe that that is the punctuation mark of my personal journey and healing. I don't want to minimize it, but I don't want to maximize it. God separated me unto the gospel to reveal his Son in me, not to show what a delightful wife and mother I can be. Am I healed? Yes. The gospel and the fellowship of godly women coached and nurtured my heart and my mind. Am I changed? Yes, from the root. And it was painful, and it was powerful.
Well, there you have it. An intellectual view, of course, somewhat difficult, but nonetheless true. I'm going to ask you to do something. When you have the opportunity, never tell anybody to go to hell. I've never looked in the face of hell, but I've seen the edge of it, and it's a horrible place. It's a terrible place. No one should go there. The things that I've been talking about over the last months, maybe even the last couple of years, are important things to all of us. You may not like them. You may not like me. That's fine. I hope you'll find some way to like yourself. And I hope you'll take this message, and maybe if you go to YouTube, you can look at this again and take a look at it. Think about it. Ponder it. In the meantime, we'll see you next week, God willing, and we'll probably have the results of the recount to talk about. You'll have seen it in the ISJ, but we'll give you the truth. God bless you. Have a good, safe week. Good night.